Jan, let's talk, Jan Blackwell, our Archivist Emeritus, and I wanted to talk with you a little bit. We're here at the convention in 2012, and I wanted to ask you, I know when you became SKA in 1984, and you went to Cincinnati, you found that we really didn't have an archives. And I just kind of wanted to hear a little bit about what you found and how you started to organize it and who helped along the way, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, when you first go on the council, and at least in my case, I was a little nervous about the whole thing. And the first time I had a moment to speak with someone, and Rosalind Dabbs kind of took me under hand quickly. And I said, well, where are the archives? And we were in the room. There was a boardroom. It wasn't a big room, but it had glass cases around the side. And she said, well, what we have is right here in these glass cases. And I said, my gosh, they're practically empty. She said, well, that's what we have. She said, I heard that there was a theft some years ago, and we lost Ida Pace Perdue's ruby badge, and we lost Sister Matt's governing council ring, which we think was a little different. Well, that was about it. And then way in the back on the other side, and I remember the staff during those years, there were some old standard size green files. I'm old enough to remember when we used those files. And I'm sure somewhere in the world there might have been legal files, but I kind of doubt it. And so I said, well, a couple of years later, it took a little while for me to get the courage up. And I said, may I open, is it all right if I open this file? And Rosalind said, I don't know, go ahead. Sure it is. You're on the council. So I opened it, and there was a mass of papers, poorly filed. Some bent, the corners bent, no file tabs, no nothing. It was just papers. And all 4 drawers were like that. And then about 3 years after I went on the council, which would have been 85, Rosalind in particular began to push that we had a centennial coming up. And we really didn't know an awful lot about our history. We knew things, a lot of it hearsay, voice, stories, and things change when we talk. So she began to feel that maybe we need to do something. And I said, well, there's a bunch of boxes back there, but they're old boxes, and some of them apparently came from Grandin Road. And I said, does anybody know what's in them? She said, no, nobody knows anything about this. It's, we don't know what it is. So during those years, and it was Kirk, Bell, Cook, Hassel, Rosalind Dabbs, Barbara Brightwell, Patty Disqui was on the council just before me, and myself, and we went back, saved a day, put on slacks, because we dressed all the time at council meetings in those days. We always had on skirts. Well, everybody pretty well dressed that way. And so we went back there, and believe me, it didn't take me 5 minutes to learn that was a terrible mistake. I would see people pull one of those cabinet drawers out and say, oh, we don't need that. Oh, we don't need that. So the circular file was growing very quickly. And somebody else, Rosalind, God love her, she said, oh, here's something from Taw. That was her chapter, as you all know. So she was thrilled to death to find anything from Taw. And the rest of it was, shoo. So Kirk was reading and reading and reading, and all of a sudden I thought, we're not doing this right. This is a terrible thing to do. We could be destroying records that are important. So I finally said, okay, ladies, I don't think we should be doing this. Let's go to lunch. So off we went, and that was the end of that. And it was about, I'm guessing about a year later, that Rosalind decided that we needed to get busy. And I got busy. They found a room for me in the basement of Carew Towers, and the first room wasn't too bad. It was a dump, and it was dirty and unpainted at that, probably in years. But later on, a little bit later, they got another one, and water was dripping down the walls. And Beth Stathos, whose dad was quite a very capable man, had taught her to do a lot of things. And we bought a legal file, one, and she made the legal things that you could put hanging folders in. And that's kind of where I began. And then I realized we do not have a set of elusives. We do not have a set of convention minutes. We do not have council minutes. We don't seem to have much of anything that we should have historically. And that's when I began to go to work. And as the years went on, I stayed on the council. I was still on the council even through the time of the centennial. And I shipped boxes of stuff home and worked on it at home. And Mary Love had saved a lot of very thin kind of paper, old paper, which was now kind of brown and crumbly. So I had a hallway in my house that looked like brown confetti, and it was not very attractive, but I didn't have enough room to place all these stacks of stuff that I put notes with Scotch tape on my walls, had to repaint the wall later, but anyway, this is minutes from a council. This is a letter to a chapter visitor, and in those days, most of our chapter visitors were older women. We didn't seem to trust young people too well in those days. But anyway, that's what Mary Love had. And by the time I got there, we were using smart young women. So
I love that. Now, what about some of the items, like the original badge? In what condition did you find?
okay, when I found the original badge, and in all honesty, I don't remember exactly where I first laid eyes on it. It might have even been in the glass cases. But if it had been in the glass cases, it was certainly an embarrassment to all of us. It had, they used to have 5 and dimes in my time and before that, and it looked like something that came out of S.H. Kress, and it was a round, domed piece of green tacky glass with a thin piece of felt stuck in the bottom, and that was this little gold badge. And it was a funny looking kind of a hand-hammered thing. So I didn't have the nerve at that time to carry something treasured home, but within a year I did, and I took it to my home in Albuquerque because we had a number of Chi Omega jewelers there, and all certified jewelers and with all the degrees. And so I took it to one of them, one of the Butterfield girls, and she assayed it, she did all the work on it, she measured it, and we realized beyond the shadow of a doubt it was the badge that Sis Doc hammered out of dental gold and was our first prototype of a badge.
How special.
And then we had it framed there as it sits today in 2012.
That's wonderful. I know you also did a lot of genealogical work on the founders and other important members of Chi Omega. Did that come early on in the time you were organizing things, or as you went through the records?
Because I love genealogy, it did begin to overlap. And I had the capability and rather a large genealogical library of books. In those days, we wasn't on the computer, so I had done everything in my family's the hard way. I traveled. I walked lots of cemeteries. Even my sweet husband crawled in the cemetery one time under briar bushes and did find one of my great-grandfathers, so that was good. But I began to do research, and then it opened up. And it was great fun. I found that, for example, Christina Morton, father was the man who proposed to the Arkansas legislature that they should build the University of Arkansas. Things like that, that were very exciting.
What?
And I learned a lot about our precious Allie. May I go on a little
Yes,
further?
please do.
Okay. The founders described Allie as a woman who had spirit within her, and they felt her spirit and felt she was very, very special. And indeed she was. For example, they said we could walk among the trees and she knew where the bird's nests were. She could usually tell you the kinds and things like that. And her mother was very ill. She was caring for her mother, and her mother did pass away. and the rest of her family, including her sister, moved to Washington, D.C. And when Allie married Mr. Smith, I believe it was named Ham Smith, or anyway, Mr. Smith, he moved to Washington too, and her sister had passed away before she moved. And then, after the birth of a son, about 3 months later, Allie died, probably from some infection connected to that birth, and was buried in the same grave as her sister, which we now know as Congressional Cemetery. And eventually, one of the local chapters there went with me, all dressed up in their high heels and their nice fingernails manicured. I mean, after all, council members were very impressive then. And they got down and dug with their hands and found the brick that had the sister on it and a little bit. Well, we worked on that and we added to that information with a little better tombstone.
And I know you've had contact with JW Holcomb's family, and she certainly was an impressive woman at the University of Arkansas.
I did. It's a wonderful family. And they were all still in Fayetteville, which is a wonderful town. And they were very, very glad to meet me, to have me to their homes, to entertain me, a lovely cup of tea, the little settee that had been wherever. And in their homes, in the early founders' times, that's where the 5 girls met. I mean, the founders met. They had fun, and they had a room, and it had pennants in it. And the archives now have some of those pictures, and they're very special and great fun, because you can see the collegiate feeling about the University of Arkansas in ages ago, 1890s. And it's pretty special.
Absolutely.
So that's, the family eventually has gifted us with wonderful things. Degrees that belong to JW, a number of things that belong to JW. And of course, we're very proud of the fact that one of their major dormitories is named in her honor at the University of Arkansas.
Now, Jan, this might be a difficult question. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you about, with all of the items that have been donated to the archives, all of the items over your span of 25 plus years, can you name a couple of items that were the most, you were the most excited to receive? Might not be the most valuable or the most expensive, but what were some of the exciting treasures when people started sending you?
Well, it's been hard for me to answer that, but all of a sudden you stimulated a memory, and it was the miniature badges. I think when we first got our hands on one of those, I felt like everything was coming together. We knew that there was such a thing, and I'm sure I knew at that time that Psi had some, and after all, those girls were Psi, so they had at least one. I don't really know about that. But the miniature badges, to me, are just absolutely spectacular. And other badges, the badge with the turquoise in it, the badge set with unusual opals, those unusual badges fascinated me. And I think some of the other things were receiving some more, what we called at that time, Psi goblets. They're a bolete goblet that were painted. And then we came to find out some years later that people in other chapters had them. Sister Matt, who was in the chapter at Randolph-Macon, which the school closed down all of their Greek system many years ago. But those were special to me. Certain special gifts happened. The sterling spoons that was given to us by a woman in San Antonio, we went to see her, and she gave me 6 sterling spoons, which are on display with the crest on the bottom. And she was the 4th. She was initiated at IOTA, and they were a wedding gift to her in very, very early years from her sisters. And those are wonderful things.
Absolutely. How exciting. Thank you, Jan, for everything that you continue to do for the archives and preserving our history for us. We thank you so much.
Well, believe me, it was my pleasure.